In a tranquil suburban park, a seemingly ordinary day spirals into chaos when a privileged woman, Emily Carson, calls the police on a homeless black veteran, James. As their lives unexpectedly intertwine, a startling turn of events reshapes their destinies forever. What remarkable moments unfolded that day, bridging the gap between prejudice and understanding. Before we delve into this incredible tale of redemption, please comment below about where you're watching from today, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this heartwarming story. Emily strutted purposefully through Oakwood Park, her designer sneakers crunching on the gravel path. At 45, she exuded an air of entitlement, her perfectly styled blonde hair and immaculate makeup contrasting sharply with the park's natural beauty. Little did Emily know, her actions that morning would ignite a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and her world. As she rounded a bend, Emily's piercing blue eyes narrowed at the sight before her. There, on her favorite bench with the best view of the pond, lay a man, his weathered face partially obscured by a worn baseball cap. His clothes were tattered and dirty, but what struck Emily most was the color of his skin. Her lips curled in disdain as she approached the sleeping figure. In her mind, this was her park, her refuge from what she considered the unwanted chaos encroaching upon her perfect suburban life. "Excuse me," Emily said sharply, her voice dripping with contempt. "You can't sleep here. This is a respectable neighborhood park, not a shelter." The man stirred, rubbing his eyes. As he sat up, he looked at Emily, who took an involuntary step back, clutching her designer purse tighter. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he replied softly, his voice gravelly from sleep. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll move along." But Emily was not satisfied with his compliance. The sight of him, disheveled and struggling, ignited something dark within her. It reminded her of her own past struggles, times she felt her life was slipping away. Yet, instead of feeling compassion, those memories fueled her anger. "You better move along," she snapped. "People like you don't belong here. You make this place unsafe for decent folks." James's shoulders slumped at her harsh words, but he remained silent, knowing he had heard it all before. As he slowly gathered his few belongings, Emily pulled out her phone, her fingers flying over the screen as she dialed 911. "Yes, hello? I need to report a suspicious person in Oakwood Park," she said, her voice thick with feigned fear. "There's a homeless man here, and he's acting aggressively. I don't feel safe. Please send someone quickly." As Emily spoke, she remained oblivious to the disapproving glances from other park-goers. An elderly man feeding ducks shook his head sadly, while a young mother jogging by glanced at Emily with disbelief. With her baby slowed down, concern etched on her face, the man on the bench, David Thompson, listened to Emily's false report with a mix of resignation and disbelief. At 58, he had encountered his share of prejudice and hardship. After serving his country for over 2 decades, he returned home to find a world that had moved on without him. PTSD and a series of unfortunate events had left him homeless, struggling in a system seemingly designed to fail those who needed it most. As Emily continued to embellish her story, David's mind drifted back to better days. He remembered the camaraderie with his fellow soldiers and the sense of purpose he felt while serving his country. However, those memories were marred by the horrors he had witnessed and the friends he had lost, leaving pieces of himself behind on foreign soil. Unbeknownst to Emily, her actions would ignite a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she understood about herself and her surroundings. The distant sound of sirens pulled David back to the present. He sighed, knowing what lay ahead: the suspicious looks, invasive questions, and the assumption of guilt based solely on his appearance. As two police cruisers pulled up to the park, Emily's face lit up with satisfaction. She straightened her designer jacket and put on a distressed expression, ready to play the damsel in distress. Officer Mike Johnson was the first to approach, followed closely by his partner, Officer Lisa Carter. With over 15 years on the force, Mike had seen his fair share of frivolous calls, and something about this situation felt off. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his tone professional but cautious. "I understand you called about a suspicious person." Emily immediately launched into her tale, her voice trembling with feigned fear. "Yes, officer. This man was sleeping on the bench, and when I asked him to leave, he became aggressive. I feared for my safety." Mike shifted his focus to David, who remained seated with his hands clearly visible on his lap. There was an air of quiet dignity about him that resonated with the officer. "Sir, can I ask your name?" Mike inquired, his tone softening. "David Thompson," he replied steadily. "I apologize for any disturbance. I'll be on my way." As David spoke, Mike noticed a slight hesitation in the set of his shoulders, a demeanor he recognized from his own service. "Mr. Thompson, if you don't mind me asking, did you serve?" David's eyes met the officer's, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Yes, sir. 23 years in the Marines," David replied. Mike nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Thompson. I served too. Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan." Emily, who had been watching this exchange, felt her sense of control slipping away. The exchange grew tense as Emily interjected, "Excuse me, but what does this have to do with anything? This man is trespassing and making the park unsafe. I demand that you remove him immediately." Officer Mike Johnson turned back to Emily, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, Mr. Thompson hasn't committed any crime. Being homeless is not illegal, and he has as much right to be in this public park as anyone else." Emily's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This wasn't going as she had planned. She pulled out her phone again, this time to start recording. "I can't believe this. I'm going to report you to your superiors. You're refusing to protect tax-paying citizens from vagrancy." As her voice rose, attracting the attention of other park-goers, Officer Lisa Carter stepped in. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. We're not refusing to do anything. We're assessing the situation, which is our job." Meanwhile, Officer Mike leaned closer to David, speaking in low tones. "Mr. Thompson, have you been in contact with the VA? There are programs available for veterans needing housing assistance." David nodded wearily. "I've tried, sir, but the waiting lists are long, and the paperwork can be overwhelming, especially with my PTSD acting up." Mike's face softened with sympathy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "I understand. Look, I know someone at the local Veterans Center. His name is Dave Martinez. He's good at cutting through the red tape. Give him a call and tell him Mike Johnson sent you." As this conversation unfolded, Emily's frustration boiled over. She marched closer, phone held high and still recording. "This is unacceptable. I'm a taxpayer. I have rights. This man is a threat to our community, and you're treating him like he belongs here." Officer Lisa stepped between Emily and the two men. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. You're escalating this situation unnecessarily." But Emily was beyond reason. Months of pent-up frustration, fear, and prejudice erupted in a torrent of hateful words. You people are all the same, protecting criminals and degenerates while hard-working Americans suffer. I'll have both your badges for this. As Emily's rant continued, she failed to notice that several bystanders had started recording the incident on their phones. Her face contorted with rage, and her venomous words were captured for the world to see. Officer Mike, having finished his conversation with David, turned back to Emily. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one last time to calm down. You called us here under false pretenses, claiming Mr. Thompson was being aggressive when he clearly was not. Making false reports to the police is a serious offense." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. In her mind, she was the victim, protecting her community and standing up for what was right. How could these officers not see that? As the confrontation peaked, none of them realized that this incident would soon escalate further.